The fall of Sam Bankman-Fried. In November 2022, one of the most celebrated young entrepreneurs in the world watched his company disappear in the span of about a week. He had been called the next Warren Buffett. He had testified before Congress. He had donated millions to political campaigns and charitable causes, building a reputation as crypto's most responsible player in an industry known for recklessness. Then, almost overnight, it became clear that billions of dollars in customer funds were simply gone. This is the story of Sam Bankman-Fried and the collapse of FTX. The rise. Sam Bankman-Fried grew up in Stanford, California, the son of two law professors. He studied physics at MIT before taking a job at Jane Street Capital, a Wall Street trading firm known for its quantitative, math-driven approach to markets. It was there that he developed the analytical instincts that would later define his public image, a young man who spoke in probabilities and expected values rather than hype. In 2017, Bankman-Fried left Jane Street and founded Alameda Research, a cryptocurrency trading firm. Alameda specialized in arbitrage, exploiting small price differences for Bitcoin between different exchanges around the world, particularly in Asian markets where crypto...
Foundation to launch something bigger, a cryptocurrency exchange called FTX. FTX was designed to be more sophisticated than its competitors, offering advanced trading products alongside standard crypto buying and selling. Bankman-Fried positioned himself publicly as a different kind of crypto executive, disheveled, soft-spoken, famously photographed sleeping at his desk or playing video games during business meetings. He was a prominent adherent of effective altruism, a philosophy centered on maximizing the real-world good one's resources can do, and he spoke frequently about his intention to give away the bulk of his fortune. The exchange grew rapidly. By 2021, FTX was valued at roughly $18 billion. Bankman-Fried appeared on magazine covers, testified before U.S. congressional committees on cryptocurrency regulation, and became one of the largest political donors in the country, contributing tens of millions of dollars across the 2020 election cycle. At its peak, FTX was valued at around $32 billion, and Bankman-Fried's personal net worth was estimated in the tens of billions. Behind this public image, though, FTX and Alameda Research were never as separate as they appeared. The hidden connection. Alameda Research and FTX were, on paper, two distinct companies. In practice, prosecutors would later establish the line between them barely existed. Alameda held a special account on the FTX platform, one that operated outside the normal rules applied to other customers, allowing it to maintain a negative balance and effectively draw on FTX customer funds without the typical collateral requirements. Caroline Ellison, who became co-chief executive of Alameda in 2021, worked closely with Bankman-Fried, with whom she was also romantically involved on and off during this period. According to her later testimony, Bankman-Fried directed her and others at Alameda to use FTX customer deposits, money that customers believed was simply sitting in their exchange accounts, to fund Alameda's trading positions, cover its losses, and finance a wide range of expenditures having nothing to do with customer trading activity. That spending was extensive. Investigators would later detail luxury real estate purchases in the Bahamas, where FTX had relocated its headquarters, celebrity endorsement deals with figures including athletes and entertainers, and the political contributions that had helped build Bankman-Fried's public profile as a responsible industry leader. For a long time, this arrangement remained hidden from the public, from regulators, and from FTX's own investors, some of whom were sophisticated venture capital firms that had conducted due diligence before putting money into the company. The crypto market's overall boom through 2021 helped obscure the underlying fragility. As long as prices kept rising and customers kept depositing money rather than withdrawing it, the gap between what FTX owed its customers and what it actually held could stay concealed. That began to change in 2022. The cracks appear. Through the spring and summer of 2022, the broader cryptocurrency market entered a steep decline. Several major crypto lenders and funds collapsed under the pressure, and confidence across the industry eroded. As prices fell, Alameda's trading positions, many of them funded using FTX customer deposits, began generating substantial losses. According to testimony given during the later criminal trial, by June 2022, Alameda owed FTX customers approximately $10 billion, money it had used and could not readily return. Caroline Ellison testified that she altered internal balance sheets during this period in an effort to conceal the scale of the shortfall from lenders who were beginning to ask questions and, in some cases, demanding repayment. For several more months, the arrangement held together, propped up in part by a token called FTT, created by FTX itself, which Alameda held in large quantities and used as a form of collateral. The problem was that FTT's value was largely determined by FTX's own actions and reputation, meaning it functioned less like an independent asset and more like a promise that depended on FTX's continued success. In early November 2022, a report from the crypto news outlet CoinDesk revealed the extent of Alameda's FTT holdings, raising public questions about how much of Alameda's balance sheet was built on a token effectively created by its sister company. The report caught the attention of Changpeng Zhao, the CEO of rival exchange Binance, who had been an early investor in FTX. Zhao announced that Binance would sell off its own FTT holdings, citing the report's revelations. The announcement triggered a wave of panic among FTX customers. Fearing that the exchange might be in trouble, users began withdrawing their funds in enormous numbers, and FTX found itself facing something it had never been built to survive: a bank run. The collapse. Over the following days, FTX's situation deteriorated with extraordinary speed. Withdrawal requests poured in far faster than the company could process them, and it quickly became apparent that FTX did not have enough liquid assets on hand to cover what customers were owed. The gap between customer deposits and available funds, the very thing that had been concealed for months, was now impossible to hide. On November 8, 2022, Bankman-Fried and Changpeng Zhao announced that Binance had agreed to acquire FTX in an effort to prevent a full collapse and protect customer funds. The rescue fell apart within a single day after Binance conducted a preliminary review of FTX's finances and, according to the company's public statements, found the situation far worse than initially understood. With no buyer willing to step in, FTX had no way to meet its obligations
to customers. On November 11, 2022, Sam Bankman-Fried resigned as CEO, and FTX, along with Alameda Research and more than 100 affiliated entities, filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy in the United States. John J. Ray III, an attorney who had previously overseen the wind-down of Enron following its own historic collapse, was brought in to manage FTX's bankruptcy proceedings. Ray would later state publicly that in his decades of experience handling corporate failures, he had never encountered a company with such a complete absence of basic financial controls. Investigators eventually determined that a shortfall of approximately $8 billion in customer funds had been diverted from FTX to Alameda Research over the preceding years. The trial. Sam Bankman-Fried was arrested in the Bahamas in December 2022 and extradited to the United States to face federal charges, including wire fraud, securities fraud, and money laundering conspiracy. He was initially released on a substantial bail package to his parents' home in California, but that arrangement was later revoked after prosecutors alleged
he had attempted to influence potential witnesses, and he was ordered into custody ahead of trial. In the months leading up to trial, several of Bankman-Fried's closest colleagues, including Caroline Ellison, former FTX Chief Technology Officer Gary Wang, and Alameda co-CEO Nishad Singh, pleaded guilty to fraud-related charges and agreed to cooperate with prosecutors, becoming key witnesses against him. Bankman-Fried's trial began in October 2023 in federal court in Manhattan. Over several weeks, prosecutors laid out a detailed account of how customer funds had been diverted, using internal communications, financial records, and testimony from his former inner circle. Caroline Ellison testified over 3 days, describing how Bankman-Fried had directed the use of customer deposits and had instructed her to prepare misleading financial summaries for lenders. Bankman-Fried took the stand in his own defense,
a decision that proved risky. He portrayed himself as an entrepreneur who had made mistakes in a fast-moving industry rather than someone who had knowingly committed fraud, and suggested that the shortfall stemmed largely from poor risk management and inadequate internal oversight rather than deliberate theft. Prosecutors during cross-examination pointed to internal messages and testimony from his former colleagues that directly contradicted much of his account. In November 2023, after roughly 4 hours of deliberation, the jury found Sam Bankman-Fried guilty on all 7 counts against him, including wire fraud and conspiracy charges tied to both FTX customers and Alameda's lenders. The sentencing and aftermath. In March 2024, Bankman-Fried was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. U.S. District Judge Lewis Kaplan, who presided over the case, stated that the fraud represented one of the largest financial crimes in American history and rejected arguments from the defense that customers would ultimately be made whole through the bankruptcy process, noting that the harm had already been done at the moment the funds were misappropriated. His cooperating witnesses received considerably lighter sentences. In September 2024, Caroline Ellison was sentenced to 2 years in prison, with the judge acknowledging her extensive cooperation while emphasizing that a fraud of this magnitude still required real consequences. She was later moved to community confinement after serving roughly 11 months, ahead of an anticipated full release date in early 2026. Gary Wang and Nishad Singh, who had also cooperated extensively, received no prison time. Bankman-Fried has continued to maintain that he did not intend to defraud anyone and has pursued an appeal of his conviction, arguing that the trial judge improperly restricted evidence his defense sought to introduce. As of this recording, that appeal remains unresolved. Meanwhile, the bankruptcy proceedings that followed FTX's collapse have moved forward separately from the criminal case, with court-appointed administrators working to recover assets and distribute funds back to affected customers, a process that has stretched on for years given the scale and complexity of the company's financial entanglements. FTX's collapse remains one of the fastest and most dramatic falls in the history of corporate fraud, a company that went from a $32 billion valuation to bankruptcy in roughly a week. What made the case especially striking was not just the scale of the missing money, but the image Sam Bankman-Fried had carefully built around himself, a socially awkward genius motivated by altruism rather than greed, trusted by regulators, investors, and customers who believed his stated principles matched his actual conduct. Sam Bankman-Fried is currently serving a 25-year sentence, with his appeal still pending. The people closest to him, who helped build the fraud and later helped dismantle his defense from the witness stand, have largely already served their time and moved on. What remains is a case study in how quickly trust, once extended at that scale, can turn out to have been resting on nothing at all.